Black Talk
Welcome
Radio.
to Black Talk Radio News. My name, of course, is Scotty Reed. I'm coming to you live from behind the enemy lines of USA Inc. Hope that my voice finds you somewhere safe behind these enemy lines. But I tell you, I don't think there's anywhere on this planet that is safe. And I don't want to alarm people, but I don't know if you grew up. I was born in 1966. And I don't want to alarm people, but I don't know if you grew up. I was born in 1966, so I grew up in the entertainment media, like watching the Twilight Zone and other science fiction. They would always talk about that clock that's counting down to when there could be a nuclear exchange between the Soviet Union and the United States. I mean, it's to when there could be a nuclear exchange between the Soviet Union and the United States. I mean, it's like we are really at 30 seconds to midnight for those that pay attention to geopolitics. It could be a nuclear exchange in the Middle East between Iran and Israel. Nuclear exchange in the Middle East between Iran and Israel. We are really in perilous times, and I don't think the people are really grasping the severity of these times. It makes me We are really in perilous times, and I don't think the people are really grasping the severity of these times. It makes me want to regret actually having children who then went and had children's times. It makes me want to regret actually having children who then went and had children. I have 7 grandchildren, and what kind of world are we going to leave them in? Is it going to be like a science fiction, like some Book of Eli type stuff? What kind of world are we even thinking about that? Are we even thinking about that? And I would say, it is political season, and given the choices that some people are making politically, I don't know if they're really thinking about it in the same way that I'm not the only one thinking about that. And then a friend of mine said, well, maybe because you were in the military, maybe because you served in a war, is that you have a different perspective, because one of her friends that she told me about felt the same way I felt about what was going on in Gaza. And this guy said, keep calling it a genocide. She said he went on a 40-minute rant. He, like me, former Army. And so, yeah, we're living in very perilous times. So what is the topic for debate or discussion? Everything doesn't have to be a debate all the time. But, Miss Kamala Harris has been losing that small lead that she got once she had been christened by the Democratic Party oligarchs, the ones that really control the party, the ones that had those multi-million-dollar, they had to give $1 million or more to have those box seats at the Democratic convention when they were coronating Mrs. Harris. Is it correct to call her Mrs. Harris? She doesn't take her husband's name, and that's okay. She's keeping her independent name. She didn't put a lot in that name. She's been in politics, not a long time, but she got in it early. And so I can certainly understanding a person wanting to keep that identity as Kamala Harris. But she got that bump. I mean, it was some reports that she was like up 5.6 points after that whole coronation of the, again, oligarchs, after they forcibly took the mantle from Joe Biden after the polls were saying this dude, he's going to lose, and so they forced him out. And anybody that say they didn't, come on now. Joe will tell you he wasn't ready to go. And the top donors, the billionaires, again, the oligarchs said, no, we are not going to give hundreds of millions of dollars to your campaigns if this guy's going to be the nominee. So they forcibly told Joe, we putting you into retirement. And he's way past his prime, let's admit that. But the way that they did that was very undemocratic. It was just very undemocratic, man. One might say it was a bloodless coup. Nancy Pelosi, then Obama came in, and then, that whole centrist, right-leaning Democratic wing of the party. And we'll talk about some of them and some of their policies tonight. And, they all rallied behind her, and she got a bump in the polls. But that has now shrank from 5%. And 5%, anywhere from 4 to 5%, that's within the margin of victory. I was talking to one of my activist friends who I talk to regularly in a group call, if not every day, every other day. And just last week, I was telling her these it's close. It's 50-50. It's a toss-up. It's a coin toss. I don't care what some of these other polls are saying and this, but it's all within the margin of error. When it's within the margin of error, 4 to 5%, it's a toss-up. It could go either way, right? And so on Sunday, October, I believe, wait a minute. I got my dates mixed up. I do believe it is Monday. So yeah, the 13th, I believe it was. The 13th, polls came out Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, and it's a tie. It's 50-50. It is 50-50. So it could swing either way. And either way it go, we're going to have G-side on the menu. So, that's very discouraging. We had former President Barack Obama scolding black Trump supporters. He's more focusing in on the males than the females. It's not many black. I live in MAGA country, y'all. We got this place where you have $1 million homes and stuff up on a mountain in Gaston County, North Carolina. We call it MAGA Mountain. I actually got a friend that live up there, and she's solidly in the Democratic Party. She's retired. She's actually running for office right now, but I don't know if she want to be associated with this podcast as a Democrat. But they know I'm unaffiliated. They know my views. They know how strongly I feel about G-side. It has just really brought back bad memories of the Gulf War, triggered PTSD, and it has just really brought back bad memories of the Gulf War. Trigger PTSD, and it's just my number one issue. My number one issue. I'm not going to say I don't care about the economy. I'm not going to say I don't care about those things, some of these social issues, but I mean, G-side, man. G-side, do I really need to explain the historic moment we are in right now? I mean, we are living history right now. We don't even, social studies and history was my favorite subjects in high school, just a ferocious reader. And it's no wonder I ended up going into the military, but, I would read about those battles and stuff like that. And I'm sorry, give me just a second. So I am new. We are doing TikTok live, and I am new. So once we get through some of my opening stuff, I will invite people to come up. I'm still learning the platform, so y'all bear with me. I guess these 3 people I have asked to come up, but we're just getting into the broadcast. So hold up, and if you're still around after we lay it out, the arguments, the debate, the points, I got some media that I want to share with y'all, some of these reports, and just, really give us some information, and then we could go debate it. All right, then we could debate. All right, so, but anyway, I do want to thank those who took out a subscription here on TikTok. Again, I'm still learning, y'all. And I appreciate the support, but we also ask people to go directly to our website. We got our Cash App, BTMP, or it's actually BTM Project, Cash App, BTM Project, PayPal, Black Talk Radio Baby at gmail.com. Or you can go directly to our secure website, blacktalkradionetwork.com. Check out some of the other podcasts. Got a vast archive. Been doing this since 2007. Launched Black Talk Radio Network in 2008. And we've been going strong ever since. I'm not going to say going strong. We are not widely financially supported. We turn down a lot of money because we don't want to be bought. We want to stay independent, and we don't take money. We're nonpartisan, a nonpartisan network, and we target the African Americans primarily, black people, however they classify, and then the African diaspora, including Africa. And we've had listeners from all over the world call in, leave comments on the podcast, and so that's our target audience. But we're open to having conversations with anyone. It's all about what you can contribute to the conversation and solving the problems facing the world today. And today we have a G-side facing us, y'all. We have a G-side, a full-blown G-side. I mean, children are, just say entire families, are literally being starved. Cindy McCain, and I couldn't stand her husband, John McCain, the warmonger. And I mean that guy, but he's dead now. He's not here anymore. But his wife became, because of that name, got appointed to like UNICEF or something, one of those UN things that look at world hunger and try to solve these problems. This is Cindy McCain, y'all. Cindy McCain telling y'all about 30 days ago that this was a full-blown famine. Again, we are in a moment of history. We don't have to imagine how Germans could sit around while the Yahtzee with their mustache leader and his gang of thugs was, engaged in the G-side. We don't have to imagine. Them Germans was probably sitting around like Americans are today. I'm more concerned about the economy. This mustache man then brought jobs back to Germany. He's made Germany great again. Look at all this industry, this manufacturing. I got more money in my pocket. You know, that G side, what G side? What G side? What y'all talking about? You know, you gonna play deaf, dumb, blind. Is that what we doing now? Is that what we doing now? And here's the thing. People don't want to be confronted with that truth. They don't want to come up and debate me or have a conversation about it because we talking about G side. It's like Ta-Nehisi Coates just came back. You know, he didn't just come back, but he made the trip, the pilgrimage to Israel. I shouldn't call it a pilgrimage because he is, I don't believe he went there for a religious reason, but journalistic reason. But guess what? All he did was do what James Baldwin did. And I believe James Baldwin went over there in the early 1970s and what have you. James Baldwin, the famous African-American civil rights activist, LGBT man, gay man, left America, said to be a Negro in America is to be angry all the time. He went over there. He visited the so-called Holy Land, and he wrote an article or an essay about the Jim Crow South he saw there, the apartheid. So Ta-Nehisi Coates, what is this, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, he goes over there, and he comes back, and he writes about seeing the same exact thing. In fact, it's even worse. It's even worse. You know who else went there? Again, this is Black Talk Radio. I'm a black man, and I come from a black perspective. Malcolm X, he went over there. Guess what? He wrote about it. He equated Zionism to racism, and he's right. It is a form of racism. We can call it religious bigotry, but it's all about supremacy. One group of people, and this is a small group of people. Zionism is adherence to a political ideology that was created by a man who lived in Germany. And these Zionists cut a deal with the mustache man. They saw that this guy's really anti-Semitic. Things might get rough if this Yahtzee party keeps winning elections. We got to do something. Let's take our wealth. We ain't going to tell nobody else, but let's take our little bit of wealth and make a deal with him that we'll leave and let us take our wealth, and then we'll go over there to Palestine and establish a colony, and then you could deport. However that conversation went, it was a deal. It's called the Havara Agreement. And we can fact check real time on this program. We can fact check real time. So there has much been written about this from a black perspective. And guess who else went over there? Huey Newton. Huey Newton, one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, and then it was also a political party. They used to have what would we call it? In military terms, we call it a unit or a chapter. It was a Palestinian Panther chapter. See, during that time, it was a struggle between Panther chapter. See, during that time, it was a struggle between oppressed people trying to unite on a global level. You had Panthers in New Zealand made up of New Zealand indigenous people. So what I'm saying is we as black people, not all of us, but the majority of us have always identified with the Palestinian people in their struggle against colonization and annihilation. They're being annihilated right now. Yeah, this is a historic point in time. So, what would you, and one of the other things I want to get into, one of the other things that I want to throw out there. How are we educating our children on this? Or are we shielding them from this? Like our 13-year-olds, I got a grandson, my oldest grandson just turned 14. It'll be his first year in high school. How do we explain this behavior to him and these decisions by the so-called leaders of our government to do this? Or are we going to hide it? Are we hiding it from our children, what's really going on? Are we hiding it? Is that what we're doing? So we don't have to explain our contradictions or telling them that thou shalt not, unalive people. Thou shalt not murder people. Thou shalt not steal. How can we look? Come on. You could put up as many of the 10 Commandment posters you want to in all the classrooms. I think that's Texas doing that. Or is it Louisiana? One of them red states. Y'all can put them all up on the wall all you want to. You had Bibles in the classroom during pre-1865 enslavement. All through Jim Crow, you had Bibles in. Man, what that mean? No, these children emulate actions. So, no wonder the generations of psychopaths keep, perpetuating themselves and plaguing our culture. They seem to be losing numbers, but that's also linked to the wars. Who do you think's going on there? You think Dick Cheney's going down there? Mr. He was Secretary of Defense when I first went into the military. You think his children or grandchildren are going to be sent over there to the Middle East or even Ukraine? If Harris wins, she's they're going to bring NATO into it. Ukrainians almost out of people, out of men. They've been, for a long time just snatching males off the street, preventing them from leaving the country. Man, it's a dire situation, man. Are we ready to do that? We ready to send our people over there? Send them to the Middle East? Are we thinking about the moral injuries we doing to these soldiers? That's why I tell people, F you. Don't be thanking me for my service. One, you don't know why I went in the service. But if you care to know, I went in there for the GI Bill. I didn't want to go into college debt. But I ain't go in there to participate in war crimes. My eyes wasn't open as a young 20-year-old who had yet to read Malcolm X's biography. So I wasn't really radicalized or exposed to militant or alternative political theories. It was just go to school, play sports, and all of that. So I joined the military. Or alternative political theories. It was just go to school, play sports, and all of that. So I joined the military. So, but how are we going to look at these children and say, hey, you shouldn't get that pew-pew and cause all these casualties at your high school? You shouldn't get that pew-pew and cause all these casualties at your high school. Cause unaliving people as many as you can is wrong. How y'all gonna look at y'all children? Those, again, when I say y'all, I want to assume everybody's a G-side supporter, but how? How you gonna look at yourself? So let's delve into. So let's delve into what some of the reports are saying, because Barack Obama was giving us a bad rap, black males a bad rap, talking about we don't got as much enthusiasm for Kamala Harris as we did for him, and I'm not. This me is not in that we because I didn't vote for him, and never. But because of I didn't vote for him, and never. But because of misogyny. Like, no, dude, you was the first one ever. You was the first melanated person who, in the system of racism, white supremacy, is classified as black, to even have a chance to win, raised all this money, record money, like, to even have a chance to win, raised all this money, record money. And yeah, that's why they turned out. And Kamala Harris isn't you. She's not the first. She'd be the first woman, but again, when it comes down to it, I think people set aside skin color and gender. Most intelligent people set those things aside. But, this morning, I want to promote this podcast to y'all. It's called Breaking Points. It's a mix of people, and they don't try to hide their, and I'm not getting paid for this, so, TikTok, don't think me on that. I'm not getting paid for this. But this is where I turn to for my morning news. It's Breaking Points. It's a mixture of progressives, I turn to for my morning news is Breaking Points. It's a mixture of progressives, a liberal, a libertarian. I don't know what Sagar is. He's more of a conservative, but he's not like far-right conservative. And they be having debates and stuff like that, but they're real journalists, and they all worked in the mainstream corporate media, and they all know how corrupt it was, and they got together and started their own media. The mainstream corporate media, and they all know how corrupt it was, and they got together and started their own media companies, internet-based media companies, much like we did with Black Talk Radio Network in 2008, and still, on these airwaves. But I want y'all to listen to this clip. It's about 5 minutes long. They titled it Full-Blown Panic as Kamala Falls in the Polls. And I just want y'all to listen to this and take some notes, because I'm going to come back to falls in the polls. And I just want y'all to listen to this and take some notes, because I'm going to come back to some of this.
Let's go ahead and start with polls. As you said, things really not looking good for Kamala Harris and the Democrats right now. Let's put this up there right now.
Some of this.
Let's go ahead and start with polls. As you said, things really not looking good for Kamala Harris and the Democrats right now. Let's put this up there right now. 3 national polls dropped yesterday morning. Really not looking good for Kamala Harris and the Democrats right now. Let's put this up there right now. 3 national polls dropped yesterday morning. ABC Ipsos. Harris was up 50 to 48. CBS News YouGov. Harris was up 51-48. NBC News 48-48 tied. All three had their last polls in September. So listen to this. ABC in September, Harris was up by 6, now only up by 2. NBC, Harris was up by 4, up now by 3. And NBC, Harris was up by 6, now only up by 2. NBC, Harris was up by 4, up now by 3. And NBC, probably the biggest drop, had Harris up by 5 at that time, now having the race tied. 4, up now by 3. And NBC, probably the biggest drop, had Harris up by 5 at that time, now having the race tied. So keep in mind, not only are all of these polls within the margin of error, but most importantly, 2 or 3 points in the national popular vote is just not going to cut 3, maybe, but 2 almost certainly not. You guys can go ahead and take a look at Nate Silver's popular vote analysis for yourself if you're interested, but none of those are comfortable enough territory for Kamala Harris. And when we start to break down where the change and all of that is coming from and some of the movement on territory for Kamala Harris, and when we start to break down where the change and all of that is coming from and some of the movement on the economy, that's probably the most important. Steve Kornacki at NBC News breaking this down. Let's take a listen.
She's the VP in an unpopular administration. Look, we asked Joe Biden's policies as president. Do you think they're helping or hurting your family? Look at that. Almost 2 to 1 say hurting more than helping. His job approval rating is in the low 40s. And then here's the twist. When you ask folks, when Trump was president, were his policies helping or hurting? Look at that difference. 44% say helping, 31. Ask folks, when Trump was president, were his policies helping or hurting? Look at that difference. 44% say helping, 31% say they hurt.
So there you go. Points on the economy. A lot of the are hurting my family. What people think about whether Trump administration policy helped their family, up by a 13-point margin. Trump really is, he is in such a unique political position where he was the president. People could see him in that job. He wasn't that president. He was president not that long ago.
Right.
And so you have the direct contrast, and you have where he was the president. People could see him in that job. He wasn't that president. He was president not that long ago.
Right.
And so you have the direct contrast, and you have not the incumbent like we had with Biden, but you have that relative incumbency with the vice president. And that is why I just go back to that moment from The View, Crystal, where she said nothing in particular that I can think of, except, oh, sorry, I would have Liz Cheney or whatever in my cabinet. And I was like, what, Crystal, where she said nothing in particular that I can think of, except, oh, sorry, I would have Liz Cheney or whatever in my cabinet. And I was like, what an insane answer. And all of the data is bearing that out. So if Kamala loses, a lot of it will come down to not only the economy, but the inability to truly distinguish herself from Joe Biden, the presidency, the administration, and to draw a contrast with Donald Trump.
Let's stop it right there. So,
Distinguish yourself from Joe Biden, the presidency, the administration, and to draw a contrast with Donald Trump.
let's stop it right there. So, it's not black males' fault. Is it, as Barack Obama said, the brothers? It's not the brothers' fault that Kamala Harris is falling behind in the polls? I mean, this minuscule number of black Trump supporters, I mean, they don't even make up 1% of his base. Don't even make up 1% of his base. All of this black Trump support is not, don't even make up 1% of his base. All of this black Trump support is not out there. It's been some black Trump supporters, like in my county, we see them. It's maybe 10 of them. That's it. It's maybe 10 of them. That's it. Out of thousands of us, it's only 10 of them. Come on, y'all. And as I stated back then, Barack Obama, and you could say that about Kamala Harris as well, is not a very good politician. Again, he was able to ride the black card, the color of his skin, not his policies or because he was helping anybody. I'm not going to pretend like he didn't do something. He did something very important, but they don't brag about it. He lowered, through passing of the Affordable Care Act, he lowered unaliving of the unborn while they're still in the womb. He lowered that to historic lows, y'all. As we talk about women's autonomy, body autonomy, and they keep making that a major issue, just issue after issue after issue. Never mind that the Obama and Democrats, his first 2 years could have codified that in a federal law. Why didn't they do it? Because then they wouldn't have that to vote, to get people to turn out to vote the next year. But what if you could eliminate that need to even have to make that decision by just providing people health care? The limited number of people and it was a lot of people that was covered, but covering certain things like contraceptives and things of that nature, it prevented unwanted pregnancies. Who would have knew? But of course, the Republicans want to be Puritans and really just don't want you even having relations with the opposite. They would have us all wearing chastity belts, but of course we know how buck wild they are. So we see the scandals all the time. So, but that's where we are. So it's not the brother's fault. It's not the brother's fault, y'all. It's the economy, stupid. Ain't that what James Carville, that old decrepit, suspected rape? That what James Carville, that old decrepit, suspected racist from Louisiana, one of them oligarchs in the Democratic Party. Ain't that what he said years ago about Clinton? It's the economy, stupid. That's what it seems so far on what these polls are saying. It's the economy. People, Joe Biden, economy is rated poorly. And by extension, she hasn't done anything to say she's going to change that policy. Really, she just adopted his whole entire staff. They're all part of her campaign. Joe Biden's people. These people have been in government. These individuals that's in the White House, in the press, man, they are recycled from Democratic administration to Democratic administration. They all are of a certain flavor, right-wing Democrats, refined racists, when we look at strictly policy and not letting somebody's melanin confuse us. So it's the economy. People trust Trump better on the economy. But you know what? Whether it be Harris or Trump, I don't think that you can save the economy of the United States, especially if a full-blown, what it looks like, war is going to occur in the Middle East. All that, what y'all think going to happen to gas prices? And the cost of everything else. Because that critical shipping lane is going to be shut down, y'all. It's going to be shut down. And that might be the least of our worries if it goes nuclear. Are we really deeply thinking about these issues? I don't think so, because I don't know that they having these serious debating these issues on the mainstream media. Most people get their news from Fox or MSNBC, something that's going to cater to the biases they already hold. We know Fox is Team Red. We know MSNBC is Team Blue. I don't know what the hell CNN is. Maybe a CIA operation, a Mockingbird operation. I don't know. But U.S. cable media is trash. But depending upon what you consume, that shapes your worldview. Malcolm X told us media is the most powerful entity on the face of the planet. It can make the innocent look guilty and the guilty look innocent, and that's power. It controls the minds of the masses. And as soon as we can admit that media controls our minds, these narratives, just because we saw it on TV, or we saw this personality that we've come to trust to do what? Read the teleprompter? We've turned these so-called news anchors into celebrities, and they're really just script readers. And you got to be willing to read that script to make them millions of dollars. That's where we at, y'all, in terms of journalism and media. And that's why it's important that you support independent media platforms. Whether you support them through apps like TikTok, we appreciate any support, any coins, I think they call them, any subscriptions. We got subscriptions going now. I think we're trying to reach a goal of 3 subscriptions. Got 1 down. Really appreciate that. But yeah, it's not black people. It's not black men voting for Trump that the polls have closed. The polls are close. So let's listen to the rest of this, because the rest of this is going to be pretty key. This anchor by the name of Crystal is going to, point to some other things that might be the problem.
I was a little hesitant to opine on this because it matches my own political ideologies and beliefs a little bit too closely, right? Of like, oh, guess what? You stopped talking about price gouging and started talking about Liz and Dick Cheney, and your polls are moving in the wrong direction. Gee, who could have predicted? At the beginning of when she comes in, there were a few very clear things she needed to accomplish. Number one, she needed to separate herself from Joe Biden. I mean, this has been beyond obvious from day one, because he is very unpopular and people are very unhappy with how the economy was under him, predominantly because of inflation. So she needed to figure out a way to separate from him on the economy specifically, but also in another area where it's very unpopular, and it was where it's a big problem with the progressive base, on Israel and Palestine. She has been totally unable, even at this point, to figure out how to message on that, how to actually create some distance, not just rhetorical distance, but actually create some distance. And people were open to her being different. We've seen polls in the past that said, oh, people actually think she's the change candidate because, it's kind of a vibes thing. She looks and feels different. She's, identity-wise, she's different. Stylistically, she's different. She's from a different part of the country, whatever. She's much, much younger, obviously, than either of these two men. But since she was unable to back up that vibe of change with any substance, here we are, right? then you roll out some pretty good policies. They're really popular. Things like the price gouging thing I talked about, the housing policy, and they still come up. So I'm not going to say she didn't talk about them whatsoever. But the thing they've chosen to lean into the hardest is I'm going to have Republicans in my cabinet. Here I am. Yeah. What's that? Bipartisan. Yes, here I am campaigning with Liz Cheney. Where's the campaigning with Bernie Sanders, who is profoundly more popular, especially among working class voters, than Liz Cheney is? So they decided to go in that direction. I think their theory was that the problem for Kamala is that people see her as too liberal, when really the biggest problem for Kamala is that people see her as having zero ideological commitments or core. And by doing this whole pivot to Liz Cheney thing, she's only underscored and exacerbated those problems. Now, I do want to say that there's a lot of assumptions that the polls are going to understate Trump again because they understated him in 20.
All right, so yeah.
The polls are going to understate Trump again because they understated him in 20.
All right, so yeah. Maybe a lot of all right, so yeah. Maybe a lot of leftists and progressive voters who typically vote Democrat are saying you're bragging about Dick Cheney endorsing you. You're talking about Liz Cheney. You out here campaigning with her or talking about these people endorsing you. You're talking about Liz Cheney, you out here campaigning with her or talking about these people in glowing terms. But then on the flip side, you running ads about Project 2025, I think they call it, from the Heritage Foundation. And then the mainstream media, your favorite performers on there don't make the connection that Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney. The mainstream media, your favorite performers on there don't make the connection that Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney work with the Heritage Foundation, the very people who wrote these documents. We're talking about Dick Cheney. Do people know what Dick Cheney did? And I'm willing to give grace to the 35 and under crowd. Okay, this was the 90s, then the 2000s when him and George Bush came into the presidency. Then the 2000s when him and George Bush came into the presidency, the executive branch of the government. So I'm going to give y'all grace. And why it is so hard for some of us more mature, older people who've been paying attention for a long time who aren't moved. Hard for some of us more mature, older people who've been paying attention for a long time who aren't moved by skin color or anything. We actually pay attention to policy. We know who Dick Cheney is, but I prepared this clip because some of y'all don't know who Dick Cheney. And I'm going to let you know, but I prepared this clip because some of y'all don't know who Dick Cheney. And I'm going to let you know, this is an old clip from Democracy Now! I follow Amy Goodman, wonderful journalist. She runs a nonprofit media. And I'm going to let you know, this is an old clip from Democracy Now! I follow Amy Goodman, wonderful journalist. She runs a nonprofit media network as well, funded entirely by the make a donation to the Black Talk Media Project, and you can do that by going to blacktalkradionetwork.com. You can cash app us and do those things. So do that by going to blacktalkradionetwork.com. You can cash app us and do those things. Support the production of independent media. But I'm gonna play this clip. This is Amy Goodman. I believe this is it's hard to date this. This was after Goodman. I believe this is, it's hard to date this. This was after the Bush administration was out of power. We're talking about a war criminal in Dick Cheney endorsing another war criminal in Kamala Harris because she hasn't distanced herself. Endorsing another war criminal in Kamala Harris because she hasn't distanced herself from the war crimes of Joe Biden's administration in Kamala Harris because she hasn't distanced herself from the war crimes of Joe Biden's administration, and they're having people who have resigned from his administration, people in the military that was part of the executive branch, like a liaison or something like that. I don't know. It's happening. People who have resigned from his administration, people in the military that was part of the executive branch, like a liaison or something like that. I don't know exactly what their roles were. Some of them in national security positions. There's been a wave of resignations from the State Department because of this Genocide. It's not even or something like that. I don't know exactly what their roles were. Some of them in national security positions. There's been a wave of resignations from the State Department because of this Genocide. It's not even up for debate, people. Anybody that's telling you what's happening in front of your face ain't happening is, why would you even let a person guess? Telling you what's happening in front of your face ain't happening is, why would you even let a person gaslight you like that? So a lot of people just rather not talk about it, not discuss it, and put it out their mind because it reveals something about themselves that ain't too pretty. We want to go around saying we good people, we have values, we have principles. It ain't too pretty. We want to go around saying we good people, we have values, we have principles, and we co-signing on the G sides. I don't care if you team blue or team red, Trump or Harris. You sign up for a G side. You're co-signing to a G side. You can tell all the pollsters you want. Harris, you sign up for a G side. You're co-signing to a G side. You can tell all the pollsters you want. 70% of people polled said they want a ceasefire. But man, come on. We way past the ceasefire. We want an arms embargo. 70% of people polled said they want a ceasefire. But man, come on. We way past the ceasefire. We want an arms embargo. Netanyahu ain't it. We want an arms embargo. Netanyahu ain't trying to stop. He's now spreading it. Man, we are living in perilous times. But listen, this is who Dick Cheney is and George Bush. He's now spreading it. Man, we are living in perilous times. But listen, this is who Dick Cheney is and George Bush. And George W. Bush at that. And I'm going to tell you, these people are not like us. And I'm talking about the Obamas too. Because if you remember, I mentioned this on a previous broadcast when George Bush was being credited with raising that money or whatever, making it happen for the African American Museum. And I don't know exactly his role or why he was there because he wasn't president when this thing was dedicated. You know, they made the little statue of MLK, which they shouldn't do. Of MLK, which they shouldn't do. Shouldn't have done that. But the museum, and they was opening of MLK, which they shouldn't do. Shouldn't have done that. But the museum, and they was opening and had this big event, and Michelle Obama was on the stage hugging all up on George, little George. You know, he all smiles and grinning up there. And I'm like, am I the only one looking at this woman being very, you know, he all smiles and grinning up there. And I'm like, am I the only one looking at this woman being very comfortable with a war criminal? But her husband did worse than Bush. But that's a whole nother road I could take y'all down. The family familiarity between the Bush family and Obama's parents. Yeah, so, his stepfather. But anyway, in case y'all didn't know who Dick Cheney was, yeah, so, his stepfather. But anyway, in case y'all didn't know who Dick Cheney was, okay, listen to this 5-minute clip. But anyway, in case y'all didn't know who Dick Cheney was, okay, listen to this 5-minute clip. This is what we're talking about.
We spoke to Richard Clark, the nation's former top counterterrorism official. Clark served as national coordinator.
This is what we're talking about.
We spoke to Richard Clark, the nation's former top counterterrorism official. Clark served as national coordinator for security and counterterrorism during the Bush's first year in office. He resigned in 2003 following the Iraq invasion. Clark said that after 9/11, right after, in the days after, President following the Iraq invasion. Clark said that after 9/11, right after, in the days after, President Bush had wanted him to place the blame on Iraq.
I resigned, quit the government altogether, testified before congressional committees and before the 9/11 Commission, wrote a book revealing what the Bush administration had and had not done to stop and before the 9/11 Commission, wrote a book revealing what the Bush administration had and had not done to stop 9/11 and what they did after the fact, how the president wanted me after the fact to blame Iraq for the 9/11, and what they did after the fact, how the president wanted me after the fact to blame Iraq for the 9/11 attack.
Richard Clark also says he believes President George W. Bush is guilty of war crimes for launching the 2003 invasion of Iraq.
I think for the 9/11 attack.
Richard Clark also says he believes President George W. Bush is guilty of war crimes for launching the 2003 invasion of Iraq.
I think the things that they authorized probably fall within the area of war crimes. Whether that would be productive or not, I think is a discussion we could all have. But we have established procedures now with the International Criminal Court in The Hague, where people who take actions as serving presidents or prime ministers of countries have been indicted and have been tried. So the president is there to do that sort of thing.
So that's Richard Clark, Bush's former
So the president is there to do that sort of thing.
So that's Richard Clark, Bush's former counterterrorism czar, who said Bush came up to him right after the 9/11 attacks to say, start linking this to Iraq. Colonel Wilkerson, that he's a Bush administration official. You're a Bush administration official. Of course, the man you worked for, Colin Powell, was a Bush administration official, Secretary of State. Do you think that Secretary of State, do you think that President Bush, Vice President Cheney, George Tenet, head of the CIA, and others should be held accountable for war crimes, should be actually charged?
I have to say that after all of my investigations, my students looking into the episodes in case studies and so forth, my own personal experience in that administration, I can only give you an answer that is, I think, utopian. I think it's far too optimistic. It's Pollyannish. Yes, but I don't think for a moment that it's going to happen.
Colonel, the Senate report says that 26 innocent people were caught up in the program, and former Vice President Cheney addressed this. Speaking to Meet the Press, he was asked about the report finding that 26 of the 119 prisoners were in this program, and former Vice President Cheney addressed this. Speaking to Meet the Press, he was asked about the report finding that 26 of the 119 prisoners were innocent. This was his response.
I'm more concerned with bad guys who got out and were released than I am with a few that, in fact, were innocent.
25% of the detainees, 25% turned out to be innocent. They were innocent.
Where are you going to draw the line, Chuck? How are you going to know?
Is that too high? Is that you're okay with that margin for error?
I have no problem as long as we achieve our objective.
That was Chuck Todd questioning former Vice President Dick Cheney. Colonel Wilkerson, can you respond to what Cheney said and also address the issue of innocence? Do you think that the 26 figure is too low?
Definitely too low when you consider the entire prison population. As I've said many times in the past, I'm quite confident that probably a half to two-thirds, possibly even more, of those initially put in Guantanamo, some 700 plus people, were just swept up on the battlefield through bounty process or whatever, and were basically innocent of anything other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But let's look at what Cheney said. This is pure Cheney. This is Cheney and Rumsfeld's tactic. They immediately deflect the question, which is a solid question, which they simply can't answer. They immediately deflect it to the other side of the equation, whether it's the ticking time bomb argument, which is a fallacious and stupid argument if you really parse it well, or whether it's, as Cheney did here, that, 75% were guilty and any one of those might have done something, and so I was good in what I did. This is Cheney, amoral Cheney. What you must look at, too, and what I wish that interrogator of Cheney had looked at, is we know positively that a minimum, and I suspect it's higher, of 39 people died in the interrogation process. Why does no one ever mention that? We know, too, that in some of those cases, the military or civilian coroner involved found the cause of that death to be homicide. The most famous case, of course, Alex Gibney in his documentary Taxi to the Dark Side, Dilawar in Afghanistan, is known about, but even that's been forgotten. We murdered people whom we were interrogating. Isn't that the ultimate torture? No one ever asked Dick about that.
And nobody's going to ask Kamala Harris about where does she stand on torture. Look, Guantanamo Bay still open, y'all. I remember Obama ran on closing Guantanamo Bay. Okay, here comes Trump. I mean, Trump is not going to close it. If anything, he's going to put more people in it. Then here comes Biden. Biden ain't closed it. He ain't run on closing it. And the Democrats, and when I say the Democrats, I'm not talking about anyone listening now, little rank. If all you did was register as a Democrat, you don't really donate to the party. You don't volunteer your time. You're not out here knocking on doors or anything like that, but you call yourself a Democrat. And I'm not saying this to chastise anybody, but when I say Democrat, I'm talking about the party bosses. I'm talking about the people that's really in control. The same cabal of people that's been in there since the 90s, the Hillary Clintons, the Bill Clintons, the Joe Bidens, all of these old heads, so to speak. And I guess I'm calling myself an old head at 57 years old. But that's who controls them. The billionaires. Where do Obama be partying on billionaire yachts? He living a life like it's golden. He don't even live in Chicago no more. He out there in Martha Vineyards. He's not like us. They don't identify with us. But it was just so insidious for him. And again, I saw this during 2016 campaign. Instead of the Democrats blaming themselves, of course they're not going to blame themselves, or keep sending out these right-wing Democrats who have harmed black people through policy. People like Joe Biden. And then you wonder why people don't want to turn out to vote. They definitely not going to support the Republicans because they so out and out racist with it. And we see the policies they enact on the state level. So there's not even a question. So your only hope is in the Democrats, right? And then every 4 years or 8 years, you get the same old bullshit. Same old bullshit. You never advance. Then we get into, well, they didn't have the Congress. Oh, man, these people are dropping things from their platform. Democratic Party this year dropped abolishing the death penalty. And we were talking about, Imam, I forget his Muslim name, but you know him as Marcellus Williams, innocent man, DNA, cleared him, and we put him to death as a society. Well, the Democrats dropped that from their platform, so Kamala's not running on that. Ending the death penalty. She didn't flip-flop so much. Claimed to be a progressive in 2020. She didn't flip-flop on all those, but she supports fracking now. She supports endless wars. So, given that both her and him support Genocide, the only choice is Jill Stein or Cornel West or any other person. Leave it blank. Because that's what you co-signing on to if you choose any of those names. And let's just be real about it. Let's be real about it. You can't lie to yourself. You can't, everybody don't practice the same spirituality, but I'm talking to my black family. You can't lie to Jesus. You know what, or Yeshua, as I taken to calling him by his real name, Yeshua. You can't lie to God. You're going to have to give an account for that one day. That's what you're doing when you sign that name. And again, I keep saying, who stole the soul? Who stole the soul of Black America? So I began this broadcast, I was talking about what? The history of Black support for the Palestinian cause, because what's happening to them, we saw happen to us. So this is where we at now. But that's who Dick Cheney is, in case y'all didn't know. The man who did the torture, institutionalized torture, institutionalized drone strikes, just all this